G'day. So here we are, looking today at the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services. Their final report, the pièce de résistance, the final report on regulation of auditing in Australia. Oh, you may know PewDiePie, the Swedish gamer who looks at, Minecraft. We're looking at statecraft here, and we're going to give you the ball by ball. It's more like bloodscraft, in fact, because if we look at this document, we scroll through, the final report is 20 pages. And if you strip out all the blank pages and the little ones with not much on them, it's about 5.5 to 6 pages. That's the actual report. Let's take a look. This inquiry is into regulation of auditing in Australia, but what it's really been nicknamed or monikered as is the Big Four inquiry. It's really into the four most powerful institutions in the world: PwC, EY, Deloitte, and KPMG. They are the biggest auditors, they provide the tax advice, and they're the biggest winners of consultancy deals from the government. It's really into the power of the Big Four. And that's why we have a report which is 5.5 pages in actual information long. It has absolutely nothing in it. Let's have a look. Oh, here we are. Here's the chair, Senator James Patterson, Liberal Party Victoria. The young senator presided over this intrepid team of parliamentarians looking into the biggest four most powerful firms in the world, and you're going to see soon just what they came up with. This really is metaphorically, this page here, this really says everything. It's a page, just white space, a page of total nothingness. But we go through, there's a lovely table of contents there. Here we go, another white page. Concluding comments, Chapter 1. So comprehensive is this report that it begins with concluding comments. It doesn't muck around. It goes straight to the concluding comments. Since the committee tabled its interim report in February 2020, the world has changed in ways that few could have anticipated. Oh, the gravity of the words. It's striking. The pandemic, the radically changed environment. They've done magnificent work, according to themselves, increased reporting transparency in the audit industry. They've done stuff which nobody else has noticed at all. Now, let's have a look. We go in here, we go through the concluding remarks, which is essentially the final report, and we get, there we go, we've got 4.5 pages, or was it 5.5 pages? And the final comments. In light of this, the committee considers it appropriate for the government to undertake a review to identify and resolve any remaining barriers to the use of digital financial reports, with a view to making digital financial reporting standard practice in Australia in the near future. It therefore seems that the central recommendation of this noble committee is to undertake another review, embarking on digitisation. Now, the internet was invented sometime in the early 1990s, and the crew here, our elected leaders, are finally suggesting that we use the internet and that we get the largest corporations in the world to use the internet too and report digitally, to not use their fax machines anymore. Now, this inquiry was almost unwittingly started by Labor, and this is what Labor had to say. Apart from agreeing, obviously, with the recommendations of the Liberal Party, here's Labor. Labor members remain concerned about ongoing reports of workplace cultural practices that dissuade internal or external whistleblowing in the workplace settings of both the major firms and major companies to whom they supply assurance services, confidential disclosure of unethical and sexual harassment, continue to be reported to senators and members of parliament. There's 10 lines here about poor workplace culture and sexual harassment. There's nothing about audit. Oh, there is an audit, mention of an audit team. There's nothing about tax, of course, from the 4 biggest firms which preside over tax avoidance globally. There's nothing about the fact that the government gives these 4 firms more work than any other private enterprises in the country, more taxpayer-funded consultancy gigs, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Nothing on that, nothing of the conflicts of interest, just a few quiet lines on the need to improve on workplace culture. Wow, that is just mind-blowing stuff from the Labor Party. Incredible. We should bear in mind, of course, that soon after the inquiry kicked off, the KPMG suddenly has one of their partners installed on Anthony Albanese's staff. So what had started with such noble intentions appears to have been derailed. We can get to another blank page. Then, dissenting report by the Australian Greens. Why would the Australian Greens dissent to such a beautiful, such a magnificent report, unimpeded by words and clutter and verbiage and excessive opinions and facts and charts and tables? None of that stuff. Why would the Greens be upset about this clean outcome? Possibly because they don't receive donations from the Big Four. You see, the Big Four are some of the biggest donors to the Labor and the Liberal and National parties in the country. They are among the very biggest, top 10 every year, almost. The Greens, however, well, they're sore losers, aren't they? They don't get any donations. So instead of having these sort of words, this waffle about nothing, what have the Greens got to say? You'd be forgiven for expecting a parliamentary inquiry into the regulation of auditing to come and go with little fuss. But this really wasn't an inquiry into auditing. It was an inquiry into KPMG, Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers and EY. These 4 firms rule the roost the world over. Their dominance is absolute and peerless. It goes on. And what's their central recommendation? Break up the Big Four. Here we have break up the Big Four, and here, for the main parties, waffle, waffle, waffle. These are the ones that receive the donations. These are the ones that can speak freely because they don't receive donations. It goes on and on and on. It's a bit of a rant, actually, from the Greens. Obviously, they've looked at this inquiry and gone, this is a total sham. It's not going anywhere, just like any inquiry ever into the Big Four or into large corporations that pay for the political process, that pay the Labor and the Liberal parties. So they've just had the crack. Somebody sat down over a nice Cabernet Sauvignon and just said, in this way, the Big Four have been the handmaidens of neoliberalism. I mean, that's art, isn't it? The handmaidens of neoliberalism. With one hand, helping companies minimise their contribution for the public good, while the other hand, enjoying the fruits of the privatisation and outsourcing of public services. Spot on. Didn't let facts get in the road, but certainly put the hand on the heart and had a good, solid go. They even had in here, there was one little snippet which we particularly loved. There's a mob called the Financial Reporting Council. There's a whole lot of these sort of things, these councils and these associations and peak bodies, and it's all lobbying and PR outfits for the Big Four, basically. You know, the Institute of Chartered Accountants, the CPA, you name it. There's dozens of them. The AASB. There's one called the FRC, the Financial Reporting Council, which basically adjudicates on how financial reporting should be. The chair of the FRC is Mr. Bill Edge. Mr. Bill Edge is a former partner with PwC. It was confirmed through the inquiry that Mr. Edge continues to receive annual payments as part of PwC's retirement payment plan. Literally, he is being paid by one of the companies he advises the government on how to regulate. you don't get a greater conflict of interest than that. The level of blindness is astounding. And it speaks volumes to the extent to which the Big Four are in control. The Big Four are literally in control of the government. They advise them on policy about tax. They advise the world's biggest companies on how to dodge tax. They get more than anybody else. It's up to $700 million a year in consulting gigs from government, from the federal government alone, probably just as much from the states. All the major projects, they are everywhere. Their signage adorns the skylines of every major city in the world. And what they've done here is to completely kill this inquiry. And everybody except the Greens has just laid down and said, shoot us now, kill us. We did the wrong thing. We beg your forgiveness. We should never have had an inquiry into you in the first place because you are perfect. It's really incredible. Now I have to finish on this note because I rang my trusted accounting academic, forensic accountant contact, Jeffrey Knapp, and I said, have you seen the final report? And he said he'd never seen a lazier report. This is the epitome of laziness. 5.5 pages of substance before we get to the Greens rant. 5.5 pages. How did it even come about, this inquiry? It came about, according to a contact in Canberra, because one of the Labor senators, Deborah O'Neill, very well intentioned, strode into the Senate one day and said, apparently she'd been looking at the world news and noticed that the Big Four were in trouble for yet another fraud scandal in the UK. And they were having an inquiry in the UK. So, seizing the moment, Senator O'Neill said we should have an inquiry into accounting in Australia, into auditing in Australia. What are these accountants doing? And apparently it was one of those days when there's a certain process to be followed. Nobody was particular, but something else was on, and everybody just sort of agreed on the one day. The people that were in the chamber said, yeah, we'll have an inquiry. No doubt they walked back to their offices after that session to hear from the Big Four going, what the blazes are you doing? Having an inquiry into us? Don't you know who we are? Don't you know who we are? Well, they've certainly found out who they are now, because I have never seen, I am the PewDiePie of joint parliamentary inquiries. I've read plenty of these reports. I've submitted to them. I've never seen one as lame as this. I've never seen one so dead, so bayoneted in the grave as this forlorn, hopeless inquiry. Once more, pronouncing the last rites on the Parliamentary Joint Inquiry on Corporations and Financial Services, final report, November 2020. Stone cold dead.